Ending up in bad relationships is one of the big glaring risks for people who grow up with abuse and neglect. People treated you badly when you were little, and as an adult, you're now more likely to choose someone who treats you badly. Now, some people with childhood PTSD, when they realize they're in a bad relationship, it's no good, they know it's never going to get better, they're really good at getting out of it. They announce it's over, they pack their bags, they leave. And that's all good, you think, right? But this is exactly when so many people who grow up with trauma are most vulnerable after they put up the boundary, after they're sitting there enjoying their peaceful life. It's then that past trauma can trigger an irrational urge to go back to the abuser. And that's the moment when you just might make the most destructive decision of your life. My letter today is from someone called Jenny, and she writes, I grew up in a home with an aggressive, physically abusive, and emotionally neglectful father and a codependent, anxious mother. My father would be loving one minute and then explode out of nowhere the next. My mother stayed despite the abuse, and my father had rage attacks where he'd hit my sister or me. He never hit my mother, though he would rage at all of us. I got it the worst, as I couldn't accept that my father was sometimes cruel. He'd have such loving moments, but he'd turn out of control out of nowhere. It's like he was addicted to rage, and it was cathartic for him to blow up. Whoever was around was a casualty. I developed an eating disorder at age 13 to cope. In my adulthood, I've gone through my share of emotionally unavailable relationships of varying degrees. They'd hurt, but eventually I would stop obsessing. Usually it was through unhealthy means with the eating disorder. But last year, at precisely this time, I ripped myself away from the most painful and confusing relationship I've ever experienced. I'll call him Billy. I'm writing because I still have this tape running in my head as the constant background noise of dread and anxiety. There's the guilt for pointing fingers at Billy, then shame for not being enough to be treated well, and generally just this overwhelming feeling that I cannot let go of him. I'm like a dog with a bone. Since I left, I've started to unpack many things I didn't see while in the thick of it, but things keep playing in my mind, repeating the horrible shame cycle. I met Billy right before the pandemic. We got intimate too fast, and this relationship taught me never to do that again. A couple of months into dating, I asked him if he thought we'd hang out after things reopened, and when he responded, let's see how things go, my spidey senses went off, and I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. I'm going to circle that. This is my fairy pencil, and I'm using it to circle some things I want to come back to when I read this letter a second time. I'll read it all the way through, and then I'll come back and see if I can help you, Jenny, okay? I'd been in enough emotionally unavailable relationships to know I didn't want the pain anymore. He took that as an opportunity to call me and try to explain himself, saying, I said that I wanted to see how it went because I didn't want to scare you off, and to please give him a chance. It felt so different from the other guys I dated because he wanted to talk things out, and it seemed like he really cared. Other warnings came, and I'd try leaving, and the reasons got worse, but by then I was hooked. At first, Billy would seem concerned and upset about my wanting to break up and ask me to give him a chance. We were exclusive. He'd say he wanted me, only me, wanted me to be his girlfriend and give this a shot. But then his behavior would indicate otherwise, like being on Tinder. So I tried leaving, and he'd make reasons why I misinterpreted his behaviors. He'd become loving and present again, and I'd stay feeling guilty and confused and terrified to break up, though I knew I had to. The worst happened when we were still relatively new. We had a picnic outside and played Scrabble, and I won and joked about how smart I was. Billy called me the C word for bragging, then told me I could dish it out but not take it when I got upset. I should have left then because that night when we were intimate, he turned into a completely different person. He smothered me with his hand and said, "Shut the F up." He did it repeatedly with such hostility. I froze. I didn't get up and leave. I went through the motions and afterward curled into a ball while he fell asleep. We'd had such good intimacy before, and he'd been so gentle before. I was so confused. When I left Billy's that night, I got to my car and sobbed. I told him that I wasn't okay with how he treated me, and I was done. And the next day he asked if he could call me. He made every excuse in the book for why it happened. He said he thought it was what I wanted. He said We were still getting to know each other, and now he knew not to do that. He joked that the color shirt I was wearing looked too good on me, and he couldn't control himself. He said his boss would vouch that he was a good guy. I could call the boss. He said he was drunk. He'd never do it again. He implored me to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was afraid of the pain, so I stayed. I just felt sheer relief that he kept trying to make it work, and when we were intimate again, he even tried being extra gentle, ensuring I was okay, etc. I told him if he ever did it again, no excuses. I was blocking him for good. We'd have a good month or two. Billy asked me on a couple of trips that he paid for and planned, but I still felt this nagging sense something wasn't right. I was in therapy, and my therapist kept urging me to communicate my needs more clearly. But things kept getting worse. We'd hang out, and sometimes he'd blatantly ignore me, cross his arms, and pretend I wasn't around. He'd say subtle insults. He wouldn't seem present. If I asked about it, he said I was reading into things and being negative. Then we'd have good days, so I would not be able to make sense of it. I started applying for new jobs in grad schools because I knew I needed to focus less on the relationship and more on myself and my goals. And then, the night before I started a new job, he was aggressive during sex again. It wasn't just shut the F up. It was just shut up this time. So I froze again. But I rationalized it wasn't as bad, but it was still bad because he said it and he smiled ear to ear. And I remember thinking it seemed less like a smile and more like him baring his teeth. And I tried leaving him again. Both times it happened. I stated clearly, when you do that, I feel unsafe. If you want to explore this in sex, I'm open, but there needs to be dialogue. I don't want it sprung on me. It's traumatizing. He begged me not to give up on us. He told me he felt sick about it. It all seems like lies in hindsight, but I still don't know. And even though it doesn't matter because it's over, I can't stop obsessing. I finally left when I made it into grad school and realized I've been with him a year, and if it were a healthy relationship, I'd feel supported and like I wasn't making these decisions about moving entirely on my own. When I ended things, he tried to make it seem like it was his idea. It was so confusing. He said he'd be the bad guy if I needed him to be, and he didn't think the whole thing was right for him either. It took all I had to make a final break. It's been 8 months, no contact, 1 year since I saw him. I blocked him everywhere. I even asked him to block me because I didn't trust myself enough not to reach out. I started seeing a new EMDR, trauma-informed therapist. Whereas when I was with Billy, I deferred going to school, I now reapplied to programs that were a good fit. I took art classes. I even won an award for my work. I've never won awards for my art. I start school in the fall. I want to have a relatively clear mind when I start grad school. I still feel broken and vulnerable, though. I blame myself and wonder if I'd been prettier, more intelligent, more easygoing. Maybe he'd have treated me with more respect. Perhaps he'd have been more clear. Perhaps if I'd respected myself enough to keep my boundaries, he'd have genuinely wanted me. I'm also angry with me for staying, like I made it okay. I know my CPTSD caused me to stay because I was so desperate for love. But the rehashing in my head is exhausting, and I'm so drained because I keep replaying all the things that he said and did that I wish I'd seen clearly. I feel like a loser to still be upset and confused a year later. How do I get him out of my head? I'm still confused because he presented this innocent good guy image to the public. I still don't know what was real. I know you also say limerence is for situations with no real relationship. With Billy, there was a commitment on the surface, but underneath it, there wasn't. What's ridiculous is that I'm upset he's still got me blocked. It seemed so easy for him to move on, but I still feel damaged by the situation and like it was just an unreal nightmare. The only good thing about this relationship was that I hurt so badly during it that I began to nurture myself instead of acting on my eating disorder. It's been a year since I acted on that, so I left behind 2 destructive relationships. The problem is, my eating disorder is a memory with 0 emotional charge anymore, but my ex is a memory with way too much emotional charge. I even tried the daily practice and got tired of the broken record. I have fear that Billy never gave a shit, and that means I'm unlovable. I'm tired of my obsession. Please help, Anna. Okay. All right, thank you, Jenny. I've circled a bunch of things here, and I'm going to come back and let's see if I can help you. I'm going to kind of point out stuff that you said to me that I think helps this become clearer, all right? So in your backstory, you grew up with an aggressive, physically abusive, and emotionally neglectful father. Sounds familiar, sounds very much like Billy. and a codependent, anxious mother. Now you're kind of matching your parents. That's what we do. And knowing that, unfortunately, isn't enough to change the behavior. But there it is. There's a total reason why this is happening. You're not to blame. It's how you were patterned growing up. And now's your chance to break the pattern. So your father would be loving one minute, then explode out of nowhere the next. It sounds just like Billy. And your mother stayed despite the abuse. Sounds just like you. Father had rage attacks where he'd hit your sister. Okay, hitting, that's terrible. That's not what's going on now. But I gotta say, I think you were right to worry about that the aggressive sex behavior is a very big red flag. All of his excuses don't really match what he did of coming out of the blue. And so you say with your dad, it's like he was addicted to rage and it was cathartic for him to blow up. It seems like that would explain also Billy. And what I noticed about Billy is that his hostility attacks happened right after a big accomplishment for you, like something as small as winning Scrabble or starting a new job. It was always connected to you taking a big step. Very bad sign. In my adulthood, I've gone through my share of emotionally unavailable relationships. They'd hurt, but you used an eating disorder to not deal with it. So this is progress. You haven't gone back to your eating disorder, and you're feeling the pain and the obsession of the relationship you really don't want to be in, but you feel hooked. So first, I just want to give you permission to let it feel that way and not judge yourself. I'm going to totally address this stuff where you think that if you were just a better person, he would be a better person. It doesn't work like that. He is who he is. And, you're doing great. You didn't return to your eating disorder. So of course feelings are going to come back. Of course the harshness of this is going to come back. And you don't go back to the eating disorder. You're going to ride this out. You can do it. And you've got your EMDR therapist too, which is awesome. Okay. Still have a tape running through my head as a constant background noise of dread and anxiety. So that makes sense. That sort of emotional backdrop makes sense because you were with somebody who, for whatever reason, like it was never really real. And he did a lot of saying what you wanted to hear, but not a lot of showing up genuinely for what you wanted. And you know what? There's totally a possibility, and we'll talk about this, that you also brought your unavailability to this relationship. There usually is something like that. Like if you find yourself again and again with unavailable people, it usually kind of points to the common denominator being ourselves who are also unavailable. So that's what you're working on now. Not going back to your eating disorder is such a powerful thing to start, coming into yourself and not escaping yourself. And I love that you're not in a relationship right now. That's potentially very helpful. So you got this feeling, I just cannot let go of him. That's okay. You don't have to let go of him. Just do not call that man. Just don't call him. All right? It's okay if you have these feelings. Ride it out. They will die down. So you started to unpack it. Things keep playing in your mind. You met him before the pandemic. What a crazy time. As I'm recording this, it's not really quite over, but the worst of it seems to be over. And sometimes I look back and like 2020, I can barely remember. It was so much isolation. And I think for all of us, we were thrown together with people. We were isolated from people. The worst in us came out. I'm not saying that as an excuse for him. You got a chance to kind of see what his worst is. And it's totally a deal breaker. But for you, I could totally see how it would be hard to leave, especially under those circumstances. Still, you didn't go back to your eating disorder. Yes. Okay. And you went in too fast. That's what happens. If you could have gone 3 months at least, without getting intimate with him, probably you could have seen the red flags first. And it's so much easier to get out of a relationship before you've had sex. After sex, especially if you have attachment wounds, which pretty much everybody who was abused and neglected by their parents has attachment wounds. As soon as sex happens, it's just this huge glomming on attachment happens, and it's very hard to leave, especially if there's also the abandonment wound. Can't leave, it'll make it feel like death. So we stay in relationships where we've known for a long time it's no good. So totally understandable, not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong, it's okay. Couple months into dating, you asked if he thought that you guys would hang out after things were reopened. And I'm guessing if you got together before the pandemic, a couple months in, that was still in those heady days when we thought that the lockdown might be, a couple of months or something. You probably thought that. Are we going to still be going out in a couple months? And he said, let's see how things go. And my first thought on that was, well, that actually seems like a rational response. You don't want to make too much of a commitment, but if you've been seeing somebody for 2 months and they don't know if they want to keep seeing you, there it is. It's not that strong yet. It's not abuse. It's not a red flag. It just means it's not that strong. But you say, my spidey senses went off. I believe in your spidey senses. Some of us have those kind of like miswired, but yours keep being very reliable. Every time you thought something was wrong, it was wrong. So a little validation for yourself there. Like, you're good at this. You have spidey senses. And you told him you didn't want to see him anymore when he acted all ambivalent about the future. And you'd been through enough of that sort of thing. And he took that as an opportunity to call you and try to explain himself. And he said he didn't want to scare you off and to please give him a chance. And it felt so different from the guys that I dated before, you say, because he wanted to talk things out and it seemed like he really cared. And yeah, I would have thought the same thing. You have to see the whole letter in context to put that in context. But that all seems kind of like, yeah, I could see acting like, oh yeah, let's see, because you didn't want to act too into it or something. That kind of makes sense. But other warnings came, and you try leaving, and the reasons got worse, and by then you were hooked. So here we are. We're getting into trauma bonding here, and as I think you know, trauma bonding, it's this psychological phenomenon that happens when love is switched on, and then it's switched off, and it's switched on, and it's switched off. And so you leave. Every time you left because he wasn't loving or he was hostile, every time you left, he would go, no, please, 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 and he'd have all these reasons and let me explain, and you can just see, I decided to leave, or I tried to leave. You keep using the words, I tried to leave, and it is like you're trying to get up out of quicksand or something, and you just keep getting sucked back in by his words and promises, and then he never keeps them, right? And he said, oh, I want you, only you. He said all that about, monogamy, and it's you, but then he was on Tinder. Oh, yeah, well, I'd say right there is when it was 100% clear. I would try leaving, you said. He'd make reasons why I misinterpreted his behaviors. I bet he did. He'd become loving and present again. I'd stay feeling guilty and confused, terrified to break up, though I knew I had to. So, this is like an energy vampire. He wants you around. He can't give you anything real, but he knows the right things to say to stop you from leaving, and he'll go to any lengths. I mean, he really said some over-the-top things here. The worst happened when we were still relatively new. We had a picnic outside and played Scrabble, and I won, and I joked about how smart I was. He called you the C word for bragging, and then told you that you could dish it out, but you couldn't take it when you got upset. I should have left then, because that night, when we were intimate, he turned into a completely different person. He smothered me with his hand and said, shut the F up. Didn't say F, I'm just saying that for the benefit of listeners. He said it repeatedly, and he said it with such hostility. So yeah, it wasn't playful, it wasn't like a little sex game, it was repeated, it was hostile, it was out of the blue. And you froze, and anybody who, if there was any chance that what he says is like, oh, I was just, just trying something out, I thought you wanted it, and then he saw you froze, it should have been clear right then. No, it's not what you wanted. It was something that offended and went very badly. So here's another thing, it's wonderfully clear. This guy is dangerous. He's awful. And so you froze and you didn't get up and leave, and you went through the motions and afterward curled into a ball while he fell asleep. You'd had such good intimacy before, and he'd been so gentle before, and you were confused. Yeah. When I left Billy's that night, I got into my car and sobbed. I told him, I guess you texted him from the car, told him I wasn't okay with how he treated me and I was done. And the next day he asked if he could call me. He made every excuse in the book for why it happened. He thought it was what I wanted. He said we were still getting to know each other, and now he knew not to do that. Oh. He joked that the color shirt I was wearing looked too good and he couldn't control himself. He said his boss would vouch that he was a good guy. I could call him. I don't know why, but that thing like, my boss, he's a good guy, call him. That just seems like a classic thing that's in gangster movies of something that manipulative people say when they're just completely full of it and it's not true. All right. Or con man and con woman things, inventing Anna, that kind of thing. Call them. They know you're not going to. All right. He said he was drunk. He'd never do it again. He implored me to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was afraid of the pain, you say, so I stayed. I get it. The abandonment is too harsh. Even when you end the relationship, the abandonment melange is so harsh that it just feels like anything is worth avoiding it when you're in it. So he even tried even being extra gentle again. And you felt so much relief that he was trying to make it work. And you told him, if you ever do that again, no excuses, I'm blocking you for good. And I'm underscoring that just because he did do it again. And by that point, you didn't block him. You lost all your boundaries here. That must feel terrible. That must feel terrible, but still you didn't go back to your eating disorder. You know, and as I understand it, that has a lot to do with boundaries. So we'd have a good month or two. He asked you on a couple of trips and paid for it, but something felt wrong. Therapist said communicate your needs more clearly. So I don't know what your therapist was hearing from you, but if they were hearing this, that seems like a misunderstanding of the situation. But, you know, they were hearing a different story, deeper one, I'm sure. Things kept getting worse even. We'd hang out and sometimes he'd blatantly ignore me, cross arms, pretend I wasn't around. Okay, so passive aggressive. He'd say subtle insults. He wouldn't seem present. If I asked about it, he'd say I was reading into things and being negative. Stonewalling, right? Then we'd have a few good days, so I would not be able to make sense of it. So you could make sense of it, but it's that with trauma bonding, you go into denial. You can make sense of it because you're very clear. Like, he was totally abusive, passive aggressive, you know, hostile, and then he would just switch on the niceness whenever he needed to control, turn the dial where you don't leave. So it's not really confusing, but I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean. You started applying for new jobs in grad schools because I knew I needed to focus less on the relationship and more on myself, on my goals. And the night before I started a new job, he was aggressive again. And he said it a little differently. He didn't use the F word that time. So you froze, you got confused. You thought, maybe this isn't as bad. Maybe it's okay. But what you saw, and this is your intuition showing you visually what you're looking at, when he smiled about it, he looked like an animal baring his teeth. And that's your instincts. Those are your instincts knowing that something dangerous is upon you. And so that's good. Good instincts. Very good. And you have to have a certain amount of clarity to have good instincts coming through like that. So you're doing something right. All right? All right. So instead of leaving and blocking him forever, which was what you swore you'd do if he ever did it again, you stated your needs clearly and said, when you do that, it makes me feel unsafe. And you know what? It's like, I know that thing you're supposed to do. When you do this, I feel like that's going to work in an abusive situation. The problem wasn't that you stated your needs unclearly. The problem is that he's out of control. Yep, and it was escalating. So he begged you, blah, blah, blah. He felt sick about it. You know it's all lies. And finally, I left when I made it into grad school and realized after a year it wasn't turning into something where you were talking together about where you were going to live. And when you ended things, he made it seem like it was his idea. And I know that's hard, but I'm just like, that's the one right thing he did. That's his way of being graceful, of just being like, yeah, well, fine, I'll be the bad guy. And anyway, it didn't work. And good. Let him say whatever he wants because you needed to go. You needed to go. But what you ended up without, what he drained you of in that relationship, was your sense of self-esteem and worth. And that's what happens with abuse. That is what happens. And that's the weird switch that flips, is that we think that we really need validation from this person and we can leave if we get the validation, but we got to stay and keep trying to get it from them. And when I tell you that, I hope you can hear it from the outside from me, you don't need his validation. His validation, even if you had it, is meaningless. And he's given it to you. Oh, you're so great, blah, blah, blah. He's given it to you. The problem is it's not in here. It's, you have a hurt there. And when people abuse you, it takes that hurt into a deeper place. And it's a pattern. And it's so good. You're changing it now. You're doing radical things different and going to school and nurturing yourself. This is so good because that's how you prevent that pattern from going in deeper, and that's how you pull that pattern back out. Remove the pattern. Change your pattern. Good job. All right. So you made the final break, and now it's been 8 months with no contact and a year since you saw him. You blocked him everywhere. You asked him to block you, and he still got you blocked. You've been thriving, you're doing your art, all this good stuff is happening, and you still feel broken and vulnerable. And you blame yourself, and you wonder if you'd been prettier, more intelligent, more easygoing, maybe he'd have treated you with more respect. I think that's the thought that we have when we externalize, I think the place where you didn't feel pretty enough was inside. I think if you had felt prettier and more intelligent and more easygoing, maybe you'd have treated yourself with more self-respect. I think that's the actual thought, but you're thinking, maybe if I were all those things, he would have treated you with more respect. But I think that somebody capable of respecting you doesn't disrespect you even if you have like dents in your self-esteem, even if you're a person who struggles sometimes. You're human. And honestly, anybody who's going to love us is going to need to love us for who we are. Nobody falls in love with the fake version of ourselves that we try to put out there so everybody thinks we have it all together. They fall in love with who we really are, and it's our vulnerabilities that will call to the heart of somebody who really loves you. Now, sometimes we're in a place where we're just so messed up. No, it's not that attractive. And at those times, maybe we don't attract somebody. You know? It's kind of nature's way of helping us have a space to heal. But if it's your heart's desire to get into a relationship, your continued healing is what's going to give you that confidence, the beauty of confidence, the beauty of self-respect that will then attract people who match the way you feel about yourself. And that's kind of what we do. We go for people who on some level match how we feel about ourselves. Now, he was really good at hiding, so I don't believe that you were as bad as him. But I think you weren't yet healed enough to spot his lies right away. And by the time you could see them, you were already attached to him. And you nailed it. You nailed one of the first mistakes at the beginning when you were like, you got intimate with him like right away. And there it is. That's something you get to do differently next time. As you know, you already know that. But that will help you. And you get to ask questions and you get to be rigorous in getting to know somebody. You don't have to like pretend everything's okay. I don't know. I think you handled yourself beautifully. I just saw how your boundaries sort of would collapse around you every time you tried to leave. I totally get it. It makes perfect sense given what your childhood was like. And you can overcome this. People do, and you will. You will. I love that you're taking care of your life. I don't think this is limerence, in my opinion. Limerence is more, idealizing somebody. I don't think you're doing that. I think you just have a lingering attachment that's hard to break. Attachment wounds are funny like that. They persist. They persist sometimes, but they heal. They heal along with all the other difficulties that you're having. They heal when you have a good life, when you make friends, when you pursue things you're passionate about, you do what you're gifted at, and you're doing those things. You can hardly fail right now. I'm so proud of you, Jenny. Okay. So how do you get him out of your head? I feel like the loser. I'm still confused. He presented this innocent good guy image to the public, but that's what serial killers do. So that means nothing. I still don't know what was real. You do know what was real. You just wrote it down for me. You know what was real. He's a guy who's capable of saying what you want to hear. It never felt right. His hostility came through. That is real. Okay? What's ridiculous is that you're upset he still got you blocked. That's okay. That's your attachment. That's your pride. We all have it. It's going to pass. Just keep, it's so good. Like when you write to me, it's like two of us talking about it and kind of going, oh yeah, that happens. It just keeps lightening your heart and keeps putting things in perspective, and it doesn't seem like he still got me blocked. I have to get through that. I have to get through it. That's like the thought that an isolated person has. So that's not what you're doing. So it seems so easy for him to move on. Well, who knows? If he's not capable of connecting with anybody, only manipulating, that would make it easy to move on. Who knows? Maybe it's not that easy. Maybe he's putting on the nice guy, easily moved on. Who knows? But I encourage you to forget all about it. One of the tricks that I think is underrated when you're trying to get over somebody is to put him out of your mind. If you catch yourself thinking about it, have some go-to thoughts that you can think about instead. Maybe you like to think about the perfect cappuccino, or you like to think about the feeling when you put your hand in warm earth because you're about to transplant something out of a pot. Just give yourself something sensory to just bring your attention to, come away from the memory of him, come away from the thought of him. You can always use my daily practice. And what you said here is like, you stopped because you got tired of the broken record. I would just say, come to the free calls that I do. Get a little support for this. It does look like the same fears all the time, but that's okay. You're going through layers of it, and it may be that you need to get a little more specific about what the fear is to get it dislodged, to really like scoop that thing out of the cement of your consciousness, and scoop it out, loosen it up, let it wash away. The that you have fear he never cared, and that means you're unlovable. You know, that's a core fear for you that came from your parents. I won't be surprised at all if it lingers, if it comes up in a few different forms, if you think it's over and then it revisits you, but you are healing from it. You are making that progress. So the emotional charge is a natural consequence of having a sexual relationship with somebody, and it's going to pass. It's going to pass. So obsession is a temporary thing. I think you're doing great. That's just my suggestion for you. Stay connected with people, especially women friends. Keep the people around who you can talk honestly about your feelings, who understand. You may want to try one of the 12-step meetings that are really helpful for this. Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous for helping to stay away from somebody who's negative for you. Or CODA for learning how to set your boundaries and hold them. Also Al-Anon could have been really helpful for you for this. So those are free. It's a great way to simultaneously learn something new and really give yourself to the process of healing while making friends with other people on the same journey. So I hope that helps. If you love this topic and you want help identifying when you're putting too much into a relationship that is hurting you, I've got a video lined up for you right here, and I will see you very soon.